4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to the City of Brisbane Complete Streets Safety Committee meeting for Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time. This meeting is compliant with the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20 issued on March 17th, 2020, allowing for deviation of teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. The purpose of this is to provide the safest environment for staff, committee members, and the public while allowing for public participation. The public may participate via a Zoom web link and/or by phone, or by using remote public comment option. The committee may take action on any item listed in the agenda. Public meeting videos. Members of the public may view the Complete Streets Safety Committee meeting by logging into the Zoom meeting listed below. Complete Streets Safety Committee meetings can also be viewed live and/or on demand via the city's YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/BrisbaneCA, or on Comcast Channel 27. Archived videos can be replayed on the city's website at http://brisbaneca.org/meetings. Joined by Zoom. Topic: Complete Streets Safety Committee meeting. Time: November 2nd, 2022, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time, US and Canada. www.brisbaneca.org/CSSC-Zoom. Meeting ID is 976-0955-7422, and the passcode is 747389. You can also join by phone by calling 1-669-900-9128, and the meeting ID is 976-0955-7422. To address the committee. When an item you are interested in appears on the agenda, you may address the committee at that time. If the matter you are interested in is not on the committee's agenda, but is a matter that is within the committee's subject matter jurisdiction, you may address it under public comment. Remote public comments. Meeting participants are encouraged to submit public comments in writing in advance of the meeting. The following email will be monitored during the meeting, and public comments received will be read into the record during oral communications or during an item. That email is tsantoyo@ci.brisbane.ca.us. Special assistant. If you need special assistance to participate in this meeting, please contact Tomas Santoyo at tsantoyo@brisbaneca.org, or telephone number 415-508-2100. Notification in advance of the meeting will enable the city to make reasonable arrangements to ensure accessibility to this meeting. Okay, I think we're ready to start. Could we start with, I'll call the meeting to order. If we could start with a roll call, please.
All right, we're still behind. We have Cabrera, not present. Detmer, not present. Strecker.
Here.
Tainter.
Here.
Wadzia.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. A motion to adopt the agenda as it's presented on the screen.
I'll second the motion.
or you'll make the motion.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
I'll make
I'll
it a
second
motion.
it. And I'll
very
second that.
good. Could we have a vote on that, please?
Cabrera absent, Detmer absent, Strecker,
Aye.
Painter,
Aye.
Wadzia.
Aye.
Okay. Agenda is approved. Let's move on to oral communications. Is there any members of the public or any present, or are there written communications that we have received so far?
No attendees right now and no emails received yet.
Okay, all right. Then let's move on to the minutes, approval of the minutes from the last meeting. I know Linda had some changes and I see Tomas got those incorporated. I saw no other changes needed in the minutes. Did either of you guys, Darius or Gregory,
Nope.
see any? Okay.
I didn't see any.
Could I have a motion then to approve the minutes as they were distributed?
I'll move to approve.
A second?
I'll second.
Could we have a roll call on that, please?
So we've got Cabrera absent, Detmer absent, Strecker,
Aye.
Painter,
Aye.
and Wadzia.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved. Okay. Let's move on to our main item then that we've been working on for several months, which is investigation of residential parking program for Central Brisbane. Tomas, do you still have the kind of the crib notes that we put together, the listing of the project items that you could put up on
Yeah,
screen?
let me unshare my screen for a second and then I'll get right back to you.
Thank you. Darius, do you have a ceiling fan on?
I do.
can
Does this
see-
bother you? I can
the-
turn that off.
No, not at all. I'm just
Alright,
looking
yeah.
at that. I was like, okay.
No, I noticed sometimes it's a little fast, sometimes a little slower. I do. Yeah, it's playing. some
Pretty
slow
nice,
fan.
actually.
Keeps the airflow going.
Okay, these are the items in the priority that we thought we should work on them. And the first two major subjects, I think we've come to consensus on, just to recap what we've concluded so far or agreed to on so far. The first one is the parking permit zones. We have come to a consensus that the entire Central Brisbane area should be one parking zone. That
Is the
was
size okay
3
for
meetings
everybody?
ago.
If it
You
could be a
want
little
it
bit
zoomed in?
bigger, zoom in a little bit.
Okay, let's zoom that in. Okay, is that better?
That's-
Great.
That
Okay,
was just me. That was me trying to look fancy without these borders, but yeah, this is better for the view.
okay, thank you. And then at the last meeting, we spent the meeting discussing how many permits should be issued per household. And our consensus at that time was 2, with some flexibility for adjustment or consideration of conditions, say 3 adults in a household or college-age children coming back and so forth. And the ability to amend it going forward. Also thought that an ADU on the property should be given its own permit, not to come out of the quota of the main property address. And I don't know, I don't think we quite addressed guest permits yet. So maybe that's where we should start. First of all, do you think are we all thinking the same on those 2 items tonight as we were over the last couple of months?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, I would agree. Nothing has really
Okay.
changed here for those two.
Okay. Why don't we move on to guest parking then? Obviously, the first question is, should guest parking be allowed?
I mean, I guess I'll chime in to start. I feel,
Yes.
yeah, that of course we should allow some sort of guest parking. I guess for me,
Okay.
the way I'm thinking about this is sort of, it depends on, I guess, when the permit's sort of in order and how long you can be there without, a permit. So sort of the one right below that, I guess, on the screen, because, if it's 1 or 2 hours, then probably don't need a guest permit program, or maybe you have sort of thing where we have, we've seen a couple examples where you can buy a pamphlet, or maybe you get 10 permits, for free, and then you can buy on more, something like that, but as guest overnight
okay.
sort of permits. But just, I guess, depends for me a lot on part B, but I'd like to hear what, you guys think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that
Okay.
is, I think in terms of my opinion on it, I guess the big parameter to it would be the hours, which I know is the next timeline on there, but I think that would make a difference in terms of what's the need for the guest parking. Because if we're planning on doing it like overnight type of thing, like I know like San Francisco and a lot of places, a lot of the permit parkings up there are overnight, type permits. And so I guess the question would be, I definitely think like any guest permits should be of low cost, but the question is, I guess, how would those be distributed? I'm not quite sure at this point how that would be. Maybe when the property owner gets the permits for the household, maybe they'll be given one guest permit with the stipulation that this is only to be used if you have a guest.
Thank you. I guess some of my thoughts on that is this has the potential to be a loophole. And people do have guests. People have visitors from out of town come in and stay, or for the weekend or whatever. Some just come once a year. Sometimes people have guests come multiple times in the year, or every weekend, or whatever. I think we need to have a lot of flexibility in this, but at the same time, not to allow a loophole, I guess, for someone to have a 6-month guest permit and have another vehicle that then their neighbors don't necessarily have access to that parking space. I guess this could be rather tricky, frankly, how we define it.
A good question would be about, maybe is the guest parking limited hours, for example? Like if our hours are, say, we're doing like 2-hour parking, we could also say 6-hour parking without permit may be allowed, that type of thing. I don't know what you guys' thoughts on in terms of the hours that would be needed.
Karen had her hand up first.
Oh, yes,
You're
Karen,
putting
go
it
ahead.
up and then down, up and then down. Yeah, I think you guys should think about the time that this permit program would be applicable. So the example that I'm most familiar with in San Francisco, they are kind of near commercial areas where residents need access, and they don't want a bunch of visitors or people that work in these commercial areas coming in and taking all their parking. So they limit that parking to people with permits for anything over 2 hours from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. So if you are coming to that area and you don't live there, you can only park for 2 hours, which is difficult. If you work in that area, then you have a car. But I think on a residential streets, what does the committee think the problem is? We targeted, when we took data, like 6 p.m. have people come home from work.
I think overnight, probably.
Have dinner. So is it like, that's I think why we put on our list, is it like 5 to 10 p.m.? Is it all night? Because I think we have to think about when we could have enforcement too. So are people coming in after 10 p.m. anyways, or could it stop at that point? And so yeah, I think you do need to know your window of time, and then think about how that and the length of time you can park without a permit, and then think about the guest, what guest issues you're going to have. Because if you did have a daytime permit parking period, you might not have as many guest issues. You still would have some, but people probably tend to have guests in the evening or weekends. And then does your program apply on the weekends or just weeknights? You know, what do we think the problem times are, I guess, is the piece of that.
See what we should do. Hold on.
From the base that I got, it seems like overnight parking is the real issue for a lot of people. Most people during the day are out at work, and there's usually plenty of parking during the daytime, unless it's the weekends, which is a different story altogether. But for sure, on the in general, I think the evenings are probably the most concern for the permit parking program. I don't know if the other people see that same issue.
I guess maybe my comment is, when I talk to people, we talk to people with the tent situation, it seemed like people were very much in favor of a parking permit, but I still, I guess, unclear of what the pain point is. I know we talked about multiple people having multiple cars and sort of hogging up space, if you will. But I guess that comes back to sort of enforcement for me too. Like, how often are people going to be enforcing? What is, like, how is this, any different than just sort of a report if there's a problem? So yeah, I guess overnight, I think it was sort of the pain point of coming home and not having a spot available for you, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I guess for me still, I guess Karen came off mute. Maybe you could sort of chime in on that.
Yeah, so the committee member that initiated kind of the study and the data that some of us took, there were committee members and a couple staff members helped collecting data. We chose, except for on visitation, there was one segment randomly chosen, and we did that at noon, but the 5 segments that were on residential streets, we did at around that 6 p.m. It was kind of like 5:30, 5:45. It took an hour to do the 5 segments, because that's when we anticipated the problem to be, or expected it to be. And we found that on average, they were counting the parking spaces and the number of cars, 95% full. So that was the problem. On one street, and some nights it was 100% full. So that means that if you're not parked, you're not going to get to park on your block. And so, yeah, we definitely saw that was an issue. I mean, we're not hearing people say, I have to park out of town, I have to sell my car, but they're struggling. And then some of the anecdotal things are, if you don't restrict, it's a public street and anyone can park there and leave their car. At a certain point it's abandoned, they'll get a ticket for that, they get towed ultimately. But otherwise, anyone can come and park in front of your house unless you have a program in place. So you've got multiple cars that don't ever move, and maybe it's not always people that live there, but they're guests. Who knows what the particular challenges are, but we're just kind of oversubscribed for the capacity that we have. And we know from our data that at that time, it's definitely a problem. It would have been hard to collect data, 24 hours a day, because we did it like manually, but that's what we know.
I guess anecdotally, I can share that since last meeting, we had someone park up front whose car got a ticket, and I saw the ticket for like 2 or 3 days and the car was not moved at all. And so I almost called it in, because it was 3 days, without moving. It was just parked there. And, if you had a ticket, I feel like you would have moved it by now or something, but there was some no follow up. And so I sort of felt that pain point. And so I could see, just took up a spot. We have a little bit extra space on our street, but yeah, I definitely can see the need for, yeah.
Did the city give them a ticket?
Yeah, it was a city ticket. I don't know.
It wasn't a tag. It wasn't you have 3 days to move your car.
No, it wasn't that. I think it may have been like a registration, like because I actually look double careful, maybe like a expired registration or something ticket. And then, but it was sitting there because I noticed it right in front of my house. I saw it for more than 2 days, and I was like, I don't recognize that car. And I didn't double check why they got, again, of course, I just saw a ticket on the window. I didn't go to see what the ticket was, but it looked like a ticket. But it wasn't one of those like orange stickers, if you will. Yeah, it wasn't that.
My thoughts are that it would be I always conceived of this as an overnight permit. I don't know. We didn't survey daytime per se. We've surveyed, like Karen said, people coming home. And in fact, we would even see people trying to park. You know, we'd see an empty spot and we'd walk down the block and be coming back at the other side of the street and hear somebody filling that spot up, you know, and we'd change our count. So I think that's the concern that most Brisbane people have, is the overnight parking. You guys think that's true, or?
I would say so. I mean, in where I am at, which is right by the park, it's a little bit different than up in the hills, in terms of the pattern for parking. Because for us, it's more of the park for the parking situation. And that's obviously different hours than the normal, like every night, typical parking. But I would say in terms of what the permit parking is meant for, I don't think it's so much meant for my area, because usually I can still find something within right in front of my house if I need to park on the street, which I don't need to park on the street anymore, by the way. So recently, that's a new thing. But I would say for what the need is, it seems like it's definitely an overnight type of deal. Maybe from, I would say, around 5 p.m. till 7 in the morning, 6 or 7 in the morning.
Thank you. Darius, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess if it's an overnight thing, then definitely, I guess, yeah. For me, I guess that comes back to enforcement then, like, and the cost of that whole, you know, like, do we have someone actively going around? Is this still just a sort of call in and report, but you have to have a, you know, a tag on your car or a hanging thing or whatever to show you're a resident. If you don't have that, you get a ticket or whatnot, or somebody comes out then. But I think, yeah, I guess if it's, I mean, 5 to 7 seems like a long stretch. I'm not sure what other people, you know, what other cities sort of regulate. If it's overnight, maybe 9, or because that way, you know, in terms of guests would be, if it's a 2-hour limitation, then if it's from 5, you have to have enforcement between 5 and 7, 7 and 9 sort of windows. Versus say after 7 or after 9, it's a little easier to maybe overnight kind of enforcement. And then in terms of in the morning, yeah, 5, 7 a.m. something, you know, I think the main part of it, if it's overnight parking, then I think anytime, you know, as long as it's not between midnight and 4 a.m., you can't park. That kind of handles the overnight aspect. But of course, we should be a little earlier because we're not, you know, a downtown area.
Okay, thank you. Karen, what are your thoughts? Go ahead, Darius or Gregory.
Oh, sorry. Did we ever? We're not. Something I'm just thinking about. We ever mentioned including Visitation Avenue in the permit program? I think we were saying no, right?
Because it's a commercial street.
Because it's commercial street, right?
Yeah. I think we were to handle that maybe as a separate issue. And you know, that's a good point in the sense that it provides potential overflow parking. I don't know if people park there overnight or not from the immediate neighborhoods.
I've only done it a couple times.
Okay. Are there a lot of other cars there or
No,
not?
There's pretty much
empty.
Maybe 2 cars. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I go to Midtown sometimes when they open at like 6:30 and it's pretty empty down Visitation. You get some commercial trucks coming in, but it's not, I don't see many cars consistently overnight, you know.
Okay. Karen, if we did an overnight program, what are your thoughts on that? And from what you've seen?
Do we think that there's any significant number of people that are coming in late at night and parking that maybe wouldn't have permits? I mean, I guess you could have a guess that, you know, if you did 11 p.m. or you know, I guess, I don't know if we want to, like, the idea might be interesting to hear what Commander Garcia has to say, is that we were going to use that they would like to use a contract enforcement company such as what San Bruno does, South San Francisco maybe too. And I don't know if it's challenging to get them to drive through at 3 a.m, but you know, they could wouldn't they most likely be able to get the same people if the last time that they drove through for enforcement was 11 p.m. as it is for 3 a.m.? I mean, I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I was thinking 11 p.m. just for more, but then I realized, you know, Brisbane's maybe like 9 p.m. even, or 10 p.m. kind of deal, where after that, they could probably be a cutoff. But I guess if overnight is the issue, then, I think, because the trade-off, I guess, is the logistics of having guest parking. If we do it earlier, then you have to have permits and all the extra thing of registering guests, that potentially. But if we do say 10, maybe there's still a need, obviously, for guest parking or some sort of overnight guests. But, it might alleviate some of the burden of sort of the logistics of the other, administrative aspect and enforcement aspect of the other part of the program. But like 10, I think would be reasonable, or 9 even. Yeah.
I think in that case, we might even be able to get rid of the guest as an aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I don't
for
know. I mean, I
out-of-town
guess it
visitors,
depends.
we need something, right? We
Mhm.
need,
Some kind of overnight.
Overnight guest.
Yeah.
yeah.
Right, and what's the length that you can park without a permit? Because if
Mhm.
it's 2 hours and you have a guest over for dinner or something, they might be there more than 2 hours.
But if it's 10 or 11, then, I mean, that puts you pretty late. So then, I think a reasonable, but this also comes to sometimes a complaint, right? Or I guess we'd have a patrol person go around at, say, whatever is 2 hours before the cutoff, and then again for the last 2 hours. I guess I don't know how the enforcement aspect would work. Or if it's just, someone has to complain, then it's still, yeah.
I mean,
I like the 11 o'clock or 9 or 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock start time, because then you can have dinner guests over, right?
Without
Or-
having to administrative sort of, yeah.
wait,
Yeah,
wait,
without permit.
start time?
Yeah.
Meaning
So
between
like
11 and, 7 a.m. you can't park without a permit.
7 or something.
But
Permit
anybody
parking
can-
only.
Anybody can park on the street between 5 and 11 p.m.? Like, that's the
I mean-
problem time.
I thought overnight parking was a problem time.
But I think Gregory, I mean,
It-
when
yeah,
all-
Around
but-
6 p.m., I think when people in the areas that are tight,
People are coming home mostly
Yeah.
from work, right? That 5 to 7 window.
5
right?
to 7 window. Yeah, really.
But part of, from my perspective, is the pain point was people having too many cars that park there that don't move, and therefore this permit program would encourage people to get those cars off the street. Versus, like, competition for local parking because too many people are coming home at the same time, and like random cars are being left there. So if the issue is that people are having too many cars, then a permit program where, I guess the limitation would come from the other side of issuing the program, and this would be sort of, yeah, I guess the enforcement of the question more.
Yeah, but that is a good point about the idea of the program really is to limit the people who are parking and just leaving their cars there forever. So would it make a difference if it was 11 p.m. versus 5 p.m.? That is a question. Yeah, that would start. Yeah.
If somebody's coming home from work, whether it's 5, 6, or whatever, wherever they park their car, chances are they're going to leave it there until the next morning, unless they come home and then they're going to go out that night or something, right? So if we started, I don't see a big difference in that regard whether we say started the program at 5 p.m., for example, or started it at 10 or 11. The main, if the permits, if somebody's going to park the car there and leave it unused, they're going to want to leave it there overnight. They're not going to show up at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock and then say, oh, 10 o'clock, I've got to go move my extra car, right? Or my 5 extra cars,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Go ahead, Darius.
Yeah, I guess the question is it because then if we say 5 p.m. or whatever, then to me that suggests that the issue is people have too many guests, and that's who takes up parking. The people who are coming, to town, who maybe we just don't have a justified reason that there's too many, extra cars here versus, I guess, a resident who comes home from work. I do agree that most people come home around 5 or whatever, leave their car and don't move it. But I guess they're not the problem point. The problem point are people who are leaving their cars for multiple days at a time and not moving in it. And then how do we enforce that? I think the big thing is if we start at 5, then the enforcement issue between 5 and whatever, because it's somebody patrolling every 2 hours. If it's an automatic patrol. If of course it's a complaint issue, then we don't have to worry about that as much. If it's like a sort of active, just to call it in to have it be investigated, if you will. But just throwing that out there, yeah.
Let me see if I understand your thoughts. You think it had the enforcement say between 5 and 11 or something like that? Is that did I understand correctly?
I guess I don't know. I guess I'm trying to, in my mind, I'm just trying to balance what the pain point we're trying to solve it. If it's that there's too many guests and like sort of unwanted cars during that 5 to 7 slot, then we need to have enforcement during that time point. Or if it's like overnight and too many consecutive nights not moving, then that's a different issue. And that would be sort of the, enforcement between those hours, like after 9 or whatnot, where they would just take a lap and then whoever's, they kind of patrol at that point. So for me, the trade-off is sort of how many rounds of enforcement, because if it is a 2-hour window, then between 5 and 9, you need at least 2 sweeps, if you will, right? Where patrolmen have to go around town. And that's very costly in my mind. Unless, of course, it's automated or complaint-based only, then I feel like we're just kind of adding a layer that we don't need, because we already have that system in place where somebody can complain about a car not moving.
I can imagine if it's one enforcement vehicle, even if it's an automatic reader system, I think it's going to be at least 2 hours, if not more, to drive every street in town. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Get both sides of the.
That's right. To get both sides. That's right. You've got to drive each street twice. That's right. So, I mean, the checking is going to take several hours to do. And I didn't think about when these people might be doing it, whether they just do it in the daytime or, I mean, the contract companies, or they can do it at night or whatever.
Or do it for 4 hours or something.
Yeah. Or say multiple vehicles.
Between 6 and 8 p.m. or something like
that. Yeah, I wanted to jump in. I guess I was thinking about it differently, but this makes sense now. If it's really the primary issue is that for the number of households, there are just too many cars. Yeah, it could be any time that we are checking whether you're permitted, whether cars are parking without a permit. It could be overnight. That would work just as well. So maybe the question is when can the contract enforcement, can they do it any hours that we ask?
Yeah.
What's least expensive? What's most cost affordable?
Right. Sure. Because it might very well cost more to do it overnight, right?
Yeah. So maybe the way since we don't know that information, maybe we should rank our priority, what we would prefer, and then, what would be our first choice, X time, and then our second choice, and so forth. And then as staff looks into the costs and so forth, that they can choose then what fits best for the city. What do you guys think?
I guess, is there any way to sort of get, I know we maybe haven't looked at some of these companies or have tried to reach out. Is there a way to get a cost estimate of what we're even talking about? Like, how is this even a reasonable thing ballpark wise to have outsourced? I know that was recommended. Is that something that we have any idea of how much that goes for or what that looks like?
No, we just know that other agencies use it. So it can't be like, totally out of the realm is all that we know at this point. Okay. Because we didn't have any specifics to really ask them. Yeah. So.
Okay.
Isn't that information public? Like, didn't you say South San Francisco? What nearby city is using one of these? Was it San Bruno or South City? I forget.
South San Francisco uses someone to issue permits, a consultant that then they apply online through a portal and issue. And I think that same company I don't know if that's the same company that does enforcement, but I know that Commander Garcia had said that San Bruno uses someone else to do enforcement. It's a company comes with a meter maid and drives through. So yeah, we don't know what those costs.
But that should be public information, right?
They might. Like I don't know about that, Patrick. They might say, "Let me customize a quote for you based on what you want."
Okay.
Because it's a private company.
Right. But I thought all government contracts have to be in the public record. No, not necessarily.
Oh, as for what San Bruno is doing, yeah, that would be. But it might be just as easy to ask the consultant what they,
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So, if we were to prioritize things, when do you get what would be what do you guys think would be your preferred time of the permit to have the permit go into effect? Let's call it the permit period, not the enforcement period.
I think for me, it's starting around 5 p.m. In terms of when it ends, I mean, that's really up in the open, I think, for me. I mean, I think in terms of enforcement, it probably makes sense to go till like 5 p.m. till midnight. That has to be required.
Yeah, for me, 5 p.m. seems a little early unless we have active enforcement throughout, because then it just sort of seems like an empty threat almost. I do think, overnight, if that's the issue, then, I think Brisbane is a pretty quiet. I think the trade-off is, again, the guest permit program, right? If it's 5 p.m., you need to have sort of a larger, more flexible guest program, maybe, or some sort of exception. 2 hours seems like, I don't know if that's the right window, 3 hours, 1 minute, whatever. Overnight, if that's a pain point, then to me, yeah, 9 doesn't really matter what the enforcement starts. I think it depends on what the cost would look like, how big of the window, if it means more or worse, right? Yeah, so I think I'm kind of flexible on the hours. I don't have a strong opinion there, other than I think there's a trade-off between enforcement that we have to think about and sort of guest permits.
And
Okay.
also, how long can you park?
Yeah,
if you
without-
don't have a permit?
yeah.
Is it 0? It
Yeah.
could be 0.
Yeah, and if we do that, then maybe we do later where it's like, that way guests can stay longer, and then at some point say 9, 10, 0, unless you have like an overnight exception pass, guest pass, whatever we come up with, to accommodate that. But yeah.
How would you enforce the time limit? I mean, if we're doing, say, an enforcement sweep once a night, that vehicle or that officer or the contractor has no idea when the non-permitted car arrives.
Well, that's like in San Francisco. That's how the old style was chalking. So they're
Right.
but now it's license plate reading. So they're reading it once and they're coming back in 2 hours.
But that's if there's a 2-hour limit.
Okay.
If there's a no, if we do like a, between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., there's no, or whatever it is, there's no non-permit parking. Then if they come by and you don't have a permit, it doesn't matter when you came, right? Unless you have a guest tag or something.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. That if it's late enough in the evening,
Yeah, it doesn't matter unless.
let people have dinner guests or whatever, without having to create I mean, for the residents, it's a big hassle. I've got 5 people coming over, 5 cars. I need 5 permits tonight. And then on the other side of that, whoever is issuing the guest permit, whether it's the contractor, there's a cost associated. If it's Brisbane PD, then that ties up their people, their time, staff time. So I'm not sure. I guess I don't want to create an over a work burden for folks on that. Any other thoughts on this? Any further thoughts?
I think just something I'm thinking about is, I mean, maybe it's outside of what we're thinking here. Kind of related to it is the guest parking. I don't know if like during permit time we want to go with a 2-hour limit or 1-hour limit, or maybe we just start around 10 p.m. as you said, since the issue is having enough parking overnight, right, for everyone, or cars staying parked for long periods of time that aren't from the city. Yeah, I have to think about it.
It's not an easy one. You bring up a good point. Say if it started, say, I don't know, let's just say 8, and it was 2 hours of allowed parking, then it effectively starts at 10, right? Or it just starts at 10, one way or the, that'd be
or maybe the
different ways
enforcement people just do a sweep at 10, and that's the time that if you don't have your permit, that you can get a ticket.
But then, I think if there's a 2-hour window, we say for guests, and we only sweep at 10 p.m. every night, then what about the other 8 hours of the night? I think that, that also it can be depends, I guess, what problem is it that we're trying to solve. Because I also hesitate to, yeah.
Sorry, I don't think you tell them when you're doing enforcement. You have the window, kind of like it worked in San Francisco. They don't always come by right at the beginning of the window. They may not even come by that night, and sometimes get away with not having a permit. So
I feel like I guess I'm overcautious of creating too much bureaucracy burden and cost for like if we're doing one sweep a night only and there's a 2-hour window, but we have 8 hours of overnight parking option, then that seems to me like a disproportionate amount of sort of enforcement for the opportunity for what. And if it's only like, you know, if maybe if it's thing that's flexible and they can move it, but if the company can only do, you know, within 2-3 hour window every night, then yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I'm interested to hear from Commander Garcia. Maybe I'll see if he can come to our next meeting, but you know, I don't know if we're using the contractor and they're doing their one sweep from 10 to midnight or whatever the case is, that if there are calls at other times, I'm not sure that there would be calls between midnight and 7 a.m., but let's say there were, if officers could potentially respond to those, if, you know, if there could be a combination type of thing.
But I guess in that case, so if the problem points people staying keeping their cars too long now, and there already is a policy in place for 3 days, it doesn't seem like that's solving the problem. And so is it that those people are just moving their cars every 3 days? Because then the permit wouldn't also solve that problem. But it seems to me like they're not moving their cars every 3 days. People are just not calling that in, perhaps.
I think
but
people
then-
just aren't calling it in.
Yeah,
a lot
and so
of
an
the time.
enforcement sweep might capture that, but it might not if it's not capturing where the car's parked. They'll just capture this car as a permit if they fall within the number of cars per household, sort of. So yeah, I guess it comes back to sort of what problem we're trying to solve in my mind. Yeah.
So, I mean, two things. One has been the Uber, the people who park on our streets instead of airport parking. And, you know, I have it up here. We see it up here. And the Uber, they'll take the suitcases out of the back and up comes an Uber. We have parking up here, so it's not really a big deal. But just watching them, they typically go maybe 3 days. So, you know, so if somebody were to call it in, and I've seen some cars in the neighborhood with orange tags on that side window, and then see it the next day, and then it's gone. So typically, it takes a day or two to get that orange tag on it, whether it's not called in or it's called in, and then it just takes time to tag it. And then the 3-day clock starts running. I think most people are on the airport runs are coming back within that window. That's what I have observed. But the other then is just people with a lot of cars that maybe should be parked elsewhere, right? That the cars that are not being used, right?
I also kind of wonder how much of those Uber ones are still happening, given Uber's more expensive now than it was in the past to go to the airport. I mean,
Well, I think Patrick's anecdote might match well, because I know Commander Garcia mentioned that there were not many cases of people getting ticketed for that, other than, you know, maybe it's that window period, though, that 3 days. But yeah.
So what would you guys think if we said tentatively a permit required, I don't know, starting at 9 or 10 at night, running till sometime in the morning? What would you guys think about that?
I think if it started, I mean, I think that would, if that helps to solve the issue, I think that's the main thing. If that solves the problem that people are having, then I think it would make sense. And it does leave leeway for some people with dinner guests and stuff like that as well. So I mean, 9 p.m. might be a good start time, 8 or 9.
Yeah, I agree. I guess for me, it'd be interesting to know what that trade-off is in cost. Maybe if we ask a consultant or Commander Garcia, we can get a sense of what that would look like, both in terms of enforcement, but also just overall cost of everything, something like that, outsourcing that. That'd be interesting to know. But yeah, I think, you know, if overnight parking is a problem, then sort of an evening 9 p.m. would allow for guests not have to have a huge guest program, but still, yeah, help with the overnight sort of issue.
Maybe
Okay, well, I can try to get that. I can try to look into that for
okay.
next meeting and have something I can email it to, so that
That'd be,
So-
yeah. Just see if there's
That'd be
like
great.
twice as much to, you know, more enforcement or not. Just depends. It'd be curious. Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, since we haven't come to a consensus on ours, but we've kind of, I think, put some thoughts out and kind of helped focus in a bit. Let's come back to the guests. or we do enforcement at 5 p.m. or 11 p.m. or whatever, I still think we need some sort of a guess for, because we seem to be targeting the nighttime and overnight parking, regardless of the start time. So we need some sort of an overnight, at least, guest program for people who are staying over for the weekend or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if I may, maybe, yeah, I definitely agree. I think there needs to be some flexibility there. And then I guess from my own past experience, when I lived in Palo Alto, we had a situation where you could have either, because they had a sticker on your car, but you could pay for sort of a hanging tag instead. That could be a temporary pass, right? And you could either have that on your car or a guest pass, but that was like a one pass. So, you know, it's sort of a slippery slope perhaps. The other thing is sort of a booklet of individual day passes, if you will, right? That you kind of hang as well as like a day where you scratch off which day you're using. And once you scratch, you're done with that permit, you know, and you can't use it again. But a resident could get a 10-pack or 20-pack, whatever it was, for some cost to hand out to guests. But of course, that, you know, depends how many we're sort of, how much capacity we can afford to give out as well.
Okay.
I-
Go ahead, Gregory.
Oh, sorry. I kind of like the, I think from my own experience, even from like Monterey, typically they would give you like a little tag that you put on the windshield. I think the, you know, permanent one would be more the sticker, and then the guest one could be the tag. And, you know, maybe that's just something whenever we start doing enforcement, they know the tag one is a guest. So if they see that tag one used every single day, and maybe we do like a 6-month tag or a year tag, something like that, so that it gets replaced and isn't just resold or something like that, you know, in the black market or whatever. But something where they'll have a tag, and, you know, if the enforcement officer sees the tag every single night on the same car, the same spot, then they know, this is a guest tag. This is not a permanent tag. And then they can, you know, maybe either do enforcement or leave a note on that and say you can only use the guest tag for, maybe we say you can only use a guest tag for, you know, a certain number of days, or you can't use it every day. Maybe it's an every other day thing. Just some thoughts on that.
Years ago, we lived in a suburb of Chicago called Oak Park. And Oak Park is an old city where all of the houses have an alley behind. And that's just how they built it. And the city actually, it was illegal to park overnight on the street, any of the streets in the residential part of town. It's just not allowed. So de facto. And so if you had guests, what you would do is you would call the police department and give them the license plate number. And then as they made their nightly patrols, they would see that car and know not to ticket it. So if this contractor can use a license plate reader, say, that might be a way to, if you have guests, you go to a website, enter the license plate number, it's entered in the system as a guest, and then that gives a way to track if this car is getting a guest pass every night, 6 months or something like that, you know, that it then becomes actually, you know, just a de facto third car, fourth car at the house.
I like that a lot, actually, if that's possible, of course. I think that's a very smart way of kind of tracking both aspects of it, and having allowing flexibility where there's sort of maybe no cost or nominal cost associated with guests, but of course, no one, you know, with understanding that you don't abuse the system. So yeah, I like that.
And the key being that if it's as simple as going on an app, My Brisbane app or something, and typing in your license plate number for the guests, then that might be, you know, an easy way, for example.
So if that were to work, how many would you want each residence to have for, say, a year?
I think one extra for household.
So 365 days a year, they can have a guest? I was thinking it might be 10 or 20 or, something more in that
Yeah.
order of
Maybe
magnitude.
Yeah.
maybe 60 days
10
or
or 20.
something.
I,
Just in
I
case.
yeah, I guess it'd be curious. Yeah, I think something like that on 10 or 20 would be reasonable. I think. Yeah, of course, it depends on like because if somebody has 3 or 4 guests in one night and they have a couple parties like that, then if it's once a month happening, then that's not unreasonable. I guess yeah. Yeah, I guess I would it's not once a night for sure because that defeats the whole purpose of having a guest pass then. But somewhere in there, yeah.
So the later we start, just the less of a problem the number becomes, right? Because then it's truly overnight visitors, not just dinner guests, say, or party guests, right?
Well, how late does Halloween go? Brisbane. Like, is that a
Both
late
pretty
night?
late.
There can't be, yeah, I guess nights like that where they just don't enforce as much, or the police don't. Yeah, Halloween or that's like the only night.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, most people aren't having.
Even that, like by 9 o'clock, I think it was pretty quiet around town already.
Yeah.
For
Yes.
a lot of parts of town.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
Okay, could we get our crib notes back on the screen, Tomas?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've kind of addressed the time parameters and guest parking and kind of left that undecided till Karen gathers some more information on enforcement costs for us. Why don't we move on to permit costs and whether we should charge for a permit, and if so, how much, and how that might be structured? The cities that we looked at were all over the place. Some charge for 2 and then more if an escalating cost for an additional. Some cities did none. And
I guess I remember one of the things we talked about before. Sorry, Patrick. One of the things we talked about before was sort of how much it would cost for the whole program, and is it something that the permits have to pay for the program, or is it something that there's like space in the budget to cover the cost? I think that kind of will play a factor in my mind. I do think, of course, there has to be some sort of assistance, like we talked about before, for people who might not be able to, or might have hardships and can't necessarily afford some cost. And of course, I do still support the additional expense on top of, the whatever permit. So those are just some of my top level ideas.
I agree.
That's kind of where I'm at too. Is just kind of seeing what level of cost the enforcement in particular, because that's probably going to be the biggest cost in the program, and then seeing if, as Darius mentioned, like if there's room in the budget already and they're planning on being okay with taking a hit, or if we need to recoup all the costs for the program through the permits. I think that kind of that's kind of where I'm at. It depends, if there's space, then it makes sense. Otherwise, we should try to recoup the costs in the permit, price. Obviously, my goal would be to make it free. I think that would probably be the best for city residents. But it depends on the cost of the enforcement.
I don't know if we will be able to recover the full cost of the program through the permit fees and keep the fees at a reasonable level. I have the feeling this is a fairly expensive to contract it out, or even if Brisbane PD did it, they'd probably have to hire additional staff, additional officers to have regular police coverage for the city, as well as the parking enforcement program every night. I think it was last week that I think it was Linda last month that thought it should be at least starting out very nominal. And I kind of like that idea, so that, again, trying to make this as easy for the public to accept as a program as possible, the fact that you have to have a permit is a big change already. And I know many people advocate for that. A majority of the city would like that, but still when it comes to actually implementing it and having to follow the rules and go get a permit and get it on sticker on your car, et cetera, acceptance kind of always goes downhill, decreases. So if we can at least start out with it very easy to implement from the public's perspective, I think that would be good. And then it can be increased in later years. Or I have a planned increase in later years to cover more of the cost. I do think we need to have some sort of program for those that cannot afford the full cost to have it subsidized. And there's the program, again, I think it was Linda that talked about the utilities. There's something that people qualify for, that they get a discount or a rebate on their utilities. And so there's a public mechanism already to identify that part of the population who should maybe get a reduced permit fee.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. One other thought I had as you were talking there, Patrick, was it might be an idea to have sort of a low to no cost for the first, say, 6 months of registration as we transition the program, and then, implement costs, say, free, no cost. And then after that, it becomes X amount per car per household, or becomes whatever we decide annually, and then reassess it after that. But sort of allowing for that flexibility, because to help encourage people to sign up.
And I kind of like that. I mean, that kind of reminds me of the, the public transportation. What's the pass? Why can't I remember what it's called now?
The Clipper card?
The Clipper card. That's what it was. How they implemented it. It was pretty much free for the first 2 years of Clipper being around. And now, if you're going to get a Clipper card now, you do have to pay a much larger amount. But at least for the first year, to get people to used to it and to use it and encourage it, it was free, pretty much, or minimal.
Okay. So do you think we can come to a consensus on that, say free for the first year, and then, I don't know, or free for the first, well, I mean, the permits should be for, I think we want them for a year, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Annual.
Maybe free for the first year, and then a potential increase for new permits for subsequent years.
Darius, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I guess again, they'll come back to cost and how much flexibility I think we have on that aspect. Yeah, I'll park it for there for a second since Karen came off mute, but I did want to come in the fines part next. So after Karen, go first.
Sorry, I was going to say we on staff's end, we can try to figure out how many we'd issue. We haven't looked at that. Like, how many addresses do we have? 2 per address. ADUs might not be so easy, but rough estimate. And then either we could probably find out what the consultant's cost would be, and we could do a rough estimate if staff were issuing these, and maybe get, like, to issue them once a year. And I think if you get one, let's say we start, just for the sake of discussion, January 2023, which we would not, but you would get a free one that January, but the next January you have to go renew your permit and you have to pay a fee. You have to pay it each year. So, the question is, the budget is all accounted for, but we can propose that council budget for this program and pay for it out of general fund for the first year. And then based on what we think it's going to cost and what we want to charge for the permit, subsidize it some, subsidize it not at all in terms of the permit fees. I'll let you bring up what you're going to bring up about enforcement, because that's a kind of a wild card in terms of what the revenue would be. We'll know what the cost will be, but we may not know what the revenue would be from that.
Yeah, I guess for me, revenue wise, I know current parking, I think it's like $35, right, for the ticket or something if you're parked. Isn't that what Commander Garcia had said? So I think that would have to definitely significantly increase if we were to have some sort of, incentive for people to move their cars, or to, sort of get, and to help sort of pay for some of that program, I guess. So I would definitely be in favor of increasing the fines. I don't know if that's something we're recommending, increasing the fines rather than keeping them as they are.
Karen, do you think yourself and Tomas can have those numbers for us at the next meeting? in terms of the cost of the program and how many permits we might issue. And so how much the program would cost per permit on an annual basis? Just an estimate.
Yeah, I think we should be able to.
Okay, that would be great.
And I do think if the fine's currently at $35, as you said, it might be something to look at in terms of the increasing the potential for fines to actually make it somewhat enforceable. If they're pretty cheap fines, a lot of people could just park it and I'll pay the $70. It's the same as I pay the airport anyway, or whatever, if that's what they're doing.
I may be wrong on that number, but I remember being shocked at how little the ticket was if you get fined for that. I remember being surprised.
I thought it was like $30 or $40. Somebody said.
And yeah, I think that's what I remember hearing too. So,
but if you're parked for a week and you get a ticket every day, that's 7 days time. That's $210. So that could add up.
My understanding was total of $30 only. So maybe there is. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I could be wrong.
Well, that's a good,
I guess
that is a good question. If they're there for over 3 days, would the city tow it still, since that's something that's within the city's current code, right? After 3 days, they could potentially tow the vehicle.
that's a good question. Karen, what do you think?
If they don't have a permit, yeah, I would think they could.
I guess maybe do we know, or did we ask last time how many stickers? Like, I see the stickers not frequently, but once in a while I'll see stickers on cars. How often they tow after the sticker's put on, or is that a ticket after the sticker 3 days there?
How soon they tow? I
mean like currently, if they put the sticker on, 3 days later they come back.
They do. I saw one towed in my neighborhood.
Oh, I was going to say they're trying not to as much as possible, but I don't actually know. I know when we do street repair projects, the police staff try really hard to get people to move their cars versus towing them away to be able to run the plate, try to make contact with people. But it may be different if someone's complaining that this car has been sitting, and it gets a ticket first and then it gets towed. I don't really know. Again, try to get Commander Garcia to come too.
That would be great. That would be good. I think we need it. Okay, I think we've kind of talked through those things. Tomas, can we page down to see what's next on our why don't we go back to the top of the section where it talks commercial park? Yeah. Maybe now we should talk a bit about visitation and if we should do anything on visitation or not. It already has a 2-hour limit, I think. Correct, Karen? Visitation?
Yes, I know we've talked about this. I believe it does, but I think what we heard from Commander Garcia was that it was complaint driven. It's not, regularly enforced unless brought to their.
And I think I recall if I read the sign right, it's 2 hours during the day. Nighttime, there's no enforcement.
That's right.
And it may not be all of visitation either. I think I remember. I think it's portion of it, but yeah, a certain part. But it is 2 hour. I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think park portion is up above.
If we did a nighttime program, an overnight program in the residential areas, it ought to flow through to visitation. What do you think?
I'm kind of the opinion on that. Like, I think there's a lot of people that could overflow on there, but at this point, there's so much parking that's available. I don't know how much it's an issue yet. Visitation, if the overflow does start to occur, and their businesses are closed at night, so it doesn't affect the businesses unless one of the bars open, which is always a possibility.
Yeah, I guess I'm quite of the.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, I think if we do an overnight program, then I think, in my mind, if visitation doesn't have it, but then you're like half a block over and you have an overnight parking permit, then if you're hoarding extra cars, it'd be wise to just move it to visitation and leave it there. And then you have the problem in the morning and it's a different enforcement issue. So I'd be in favor of just extending it, over if it's an overnight thing, to extending it through that area, even though we talked about leaving that as a separate area. But it's not that large of a commercial district visitation. It's, a couple blocks only in terms of, I think that would make sense to not allow overnight parking there if you don't allow it, half a block over. I meant to see that.
Okay, and maybe it would encourage people to use it, at least on the adjacent streets. It might help free up, for the first block off of visitation on both sides. It might free up a little bit of parking if people knew they could park on visitation. So I guess we're in agreement then that visitation would, if it's an overnight permit program, visitation would be part of that program. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay, Gregory, expand.
I guess I'm just not sure it's needed on visitation. Just because, and I don't know. I'm just thinking in the future if there's if one of those bars or something opens up. Not that we know. I mean, that's could be a long time in the future, but then there could be issues with conflict with business. If their patrons can't get parking on the street at night. I mean, right now it's not a problem because everything closes by 9. But who knows if all of a sudden all those 3 bars that used to exist are there again? And they're working. That could be a conflict with the business with overnight parking. Yeah.
Okay. Darius, what do you think? Include or exclude?
My vote would be include only because it is a small area. I understand Gregory's point in terms of in the future, it could expand. I think if we get to that point, we'd have to probably reevaluate more issues in terms of the area. And then, of course, off-street parking is an option for like a Brisbane Inn type deal where they used to have that. But I understand the need for that in the future. I would vote just for it, having it included just for the sake of simplicity, where that you don't have like 2 strips of street or 3 blocks that are excluded from the permit. But yeah, not a hill I want to die on necessarily either. So I think open to the rest of the committee, but I think I would lean towards including it.
Okay.
And I think I'm also just based on just that discussion there. We could include it, and if it does come up later with a business having an issue with that, later on, I'm sure it's something the city council can look at, or the committee itself, and recommend to see change.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm leaning towards including it, and I understand the burden it could place on business, and that's not good. We need businesses back in downtown, and but why don't we include it at the moment since I think we're on that consensus, and okay, we'll move on from there.
Question.
And then
Question on that, because we studied the middle of the day, so we have a 2-hour limit. So that's kind of better than a permit, because those businesses, unless there are people working in them, wouldn't necessarily have a year-round permit. So we would want then to enforce that 2-hour parking in the daytime.
In my mind, it was more enforcing the overnight parking, and the 2 hour would stay as is with the current policy. And so they'd have sort of a 2-hour commercial limit, and then the overnight would still have sort of a, central Brisbane wide, including visitation, no overnight parking without permit. But the 2 hour would sort of be as is and not part of the enforcement. But I don't know.
The 2-hour limit is until what, 6 p.m., Karen? Like other cities, and Sundays and holidays are excluded? Probably.
I think it's 6. Yeah. And I'm wondering too, what we could do potentially, just something that I'm thinking about for visitation, is overnight parking with permit only. Do we still want to allow 2-hour parking within visitation only? Which I don't think we were thinking for everyone else was kind of needing the guest parking. But will we need the guest parking for visitation versus like a 2-hour parking?
So I get But like
I'm
up
not
on
sure
the
how big
higher mountain, a higher like Kings Road, places like that, that'd be a long trek up the hill. If you were a guest up, say up on Kings and you had to park down on
Yeah, that's true.
Visitation. Okay. I think we've kind of worked through everything that we can. The rest of this on the commercial really becomes moot if we just include it as part of the rest of the city's program and leave the 2-hour limit. I think the 2-hour limit is an advantage for businesses. It causes places to free up, which means it's easier for additional customers to come in and find parking. I think that's an advantage for business. During the day, you aren't spending 2 hours and more than 2 hours in a restaurant for sure. And, you know, in Nana's or, you know. Okay. Kind of stopping point on the parking program for tonight. And I think we have some items that we need to discuss again next month. Again, coming back to the hours of that it will be in effect. Structure the guest parking and including visitation and putting that in the context of what it costs, what the cost of the program would be, as well as what the permit fee would be. With that in mind, why don't we conclude the parking project discussion for tonight and then move on to the rest of the agenda. Unless either of you, Gregory or Darius, do you have anything additional you'd like to add on this tonight? Karen, did you have anything to add?
No, I think you guys, that's good progress, and staff needs to bring you a little more information to kind of wrap up some of this.
Yeah.
Good work.
Okay. This feels really good. Can we get the agenda back? Okay. Is there any new business to discuss? Okay. Staff update?
I wrote down a couple. Tomas, do you have any?
Mine was gonna be that we submitted our request for allocation, as they call it with Caltrans, for the Crocker Trail Park project. I know you guys have been talking about that even from before I got here, but it's been a lot of like back and forth with Caltrans, but we just sent them the package of our plans and our contract documents and all that will essentially give us the green light to put it out to bid next year. So and then get it built like we've been saying, and get it built in the summer. So we moved forward with that is all really.
Fantastic. Glad to see that moving forward.
I noted you mentioned, so I don't know if this is a staff update, but Patrick, you mentioned that we asked the city manager to update council on where we are on this and what we think our new target finishing date is for the recommendations for the residential parking permit program. So we're going to let them know that we hope to have something, the committee wrap up a recommendation in January and bring it to council in February. Target, which seems doable after tonight. And I noted, I think, Tomas, is this correct? We got an email, I was already on vacation, but that we were awarded for the Central Brisbane stairway additions to do the design and construct the Tulare to Santa Clara.
Yeah, that's right. So I was 2 for 2 now, but yeah. But yeah, we did.
Tomas is our lucky charm. Yeah, grant. And
that's great.
I wrote down Day in the Park, but we already talked about that after our meeting last month was right afterwards. And we've got a whole year to think about if we were going to have another booth or what we would do at a booth. So just table that for now. And then I'm hearing, but I'm not hearing officially, but I think I heard it from a peer at another agency that the state is going to withdraw its exception to the Brown Act in February of next year. And I don't know if that'll mean that we can do hybrid meetings or it will mean we can only do in-person meetings. I'll have more on that as I hear, because I haven't really heard anything officially from the city, but just everybody wants advance warning, because we've been doing Zoom for so long. So I'm hearing maybe it's the end of February, so maybe it would affect us in March. And that's all I had on staff updates. And I know, Patrick, you had asked about the Sierra Point Park planning, and I thought since we didn't have that necessarily agendized, that fits under chair and committee member matters, if there's any update.
Daria, I think you had an update on that, right?
Yep. Yeah, there'll be a meeting next Monday, the November 7th for that. And so it's November 7th at 3 p.m. We'll be meeting on site there at the location for the park there. So I'll have more updates next week on that, or next month rather.
And that's for the Sierra Point.
The Sierra Point Park sort of plan proposal. And so I'll be representing this committee as part of that.
And that's your first interaction with consultant, because you missed their kickoff.
That's correct. Was there kickoff? When was it?
It was early October. You didn't miss it.
Yeah,
we hadn't assigned someone from the committee.
Just make sure. Yeah.
We
So
hadn't been
an
asked.
invite. Yeah.
We hadn't been asked to appoint someone until it was right before our October meeting, which worked out, but they had already had their first.
Okay. Covered. I have nothing for chair. Any other committee member matters that we want to bring up?
Something that may want to bring up for future. I'm kind of noticing a lot more of down here at the bottom of the the flats, as we call them, is just an idea about what's the potential for putting up a stop sign at the intersection of San Bruno Avenue and Mariposa. Reason being, are not. So let me make sure I got the right intersection. The reason being that at that particular stop, Mariposa, there's no stops from Mendocino all the way to San Francisco Avenue, and people just fly by there, crazy speed. And I was just trying to think of what's ways to slow some people down, because with Halloween, like I saw some kids almost got hit, and I was, it's just something where I'm like, stop sign there might just be enough to just another way to slow them down. Just something I want to kind of bring up for potential for us to discuss in the future. I'm not sure how that starts, but to look at.
So one more time, which intersection was that? That's one.
San Bruno Avenue and Mariposa.
San Bruno, Mariposa. Okay, right before the park there.
A child was hit on San Bruno not that long ago. I don't think she was seriously injured. I remember, I forget where I read about it, but unfortunately, a child was running across the street when they probably should not have been, but that happened, and did get hit by a car or side scratched by a car. I think she ran into the car as it was driving past. But I know exactly what you mean on that street. It is, people do go, especially if you're going downhill.
Mm-hmm.
People tend to just, and unfortunately that's happening post-COVID all over the country. Vehicle pedestrian accidents are up, and they're up. They've increased in terms of miles driven significantly. Accidents per miles driven have increased significantly. I don't know how staff will think about this considering prior discussions. Aaron, do you want to make a comment?
I'm gonna use the fact that we're working on the parking permit program to kind of defer, but typically in practice, just generally, without having looked at the statistics here or the exact, situation in terms of stop signs on side streets versus on San Bruno, is stop signs are not intended to control speed. They're to determine who has right of way at an intersection. And we try to use traffic calming methods to control speed, rumble strips, spots, dots, signs, flashing signs, chicanes in the road, things like that. If you have too many stop signs, people start rolling through all of them. And the police can't enforce. If you had one every block, people would not come to a full stop every block up San Bruno. So I don't want to talk specifically about that without having looked at it some more. So I'm just going to kind of throw that general rules of thumb and practices. There used to be warrants for stop signs, and you had to have a certain amount of traffic and a certain amount of pedestrians. Those, the state who regulated that took those away. There are still warrants for traffic signals, but there aren't warrants for stop signs. Kind of to make our jobs easier if there were. But I think let's see if we can look at this in more detail after we finish the parking permit. What we do, you guys new to the committee may not know, is that we come up with a work plan at the start of the year, which maybe we'll do right as we finish this. And then we meet with our council liaison sometimes to talk about things we want to work on, come up with a work plan. I bring that to council and have them kind of bless it. So there's room to, think about the issues that you guys are seeing in town and propose them into our work plan. So definitely not a bad time to bring it up. So we can just leave it there now.
Let's
and it is, and for me, is if it's not a stop sign, that's fine too. It's something to slow people down there. It gets, people are flying down that part of the street, especially past Merced. I think it's Merced, right? What is my name? The name's of the street.
Mendocino?
Mendocino, where the last stop sign is.
I think we have a list before we got the parking. What is our highest priority? I think we had a list from earlier this year. Maybe we can just add this to it. Traffic calming on San Bruno Avenue, and revisit that list as we come into the new year.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Our next meeting is December 7th, 2022. And I guess I'll call for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
I
think we can do it by acclamation. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Have a good November.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah. See you in early December.
Yeah.
See you
Early
guys.
December.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.